Hi folks, welcome to your latest Planning Outlook that's updated on Friday the 27th of November. Now, a bit of everything thrown in over the week ahead. We've got fairly quiet conditions continuing through this weekend for the most part before westerly winds strengthen through into Monday, bringing some rain, especially into western Scotland. Temperatures overall for the next sort of 4 or 5 days at least are typically at or just above freezing point on most mountains, touch of frost on some nights in the valleys and the glens, but indications favour much chillier conditions developing later on in the week. Let's deal with the short term first of all, and as we go overnight into Saturday morning, a little bit of precipitation drifting northwards across Scotland, bit of snow across the higher mountains, maybe the odd burst of a shower still just lingering around in places just after dawn, mostly around some of the coastal hills, but that's more or less out of the way, and a very good day in prospect across most of Scotland, dry with a good amount of sunshine, superb visibility across most of the mountains, just some low-level fog banks and 1 or 2 banks of fog across some of the higher slopes as well, but many of the mountains often in the clear. Further south though, notice we've got some rain coming up into Wales from the south, that already around across the Brecon Beacons first thing, and that pushing its way northwards with some very murky conditions too, advancing north with time, that getting towards the Snowdon Range as we get toward the middle of the day, some rain extending into the Peak District as well, and that just pushing a bit further northwards up the Pennines as time goes on, and a generally wetter afternoon across much of North Wales as well. That rain, a little bit sporadic, some places some heavy bursts around, other places just patches of drizzle, but likely just to be around for a rather damp picture, and that just by the end of the daytime starting to nudge its way toward the south of the Lake District too, although most likely you get away with daylight generally dry. That rain just tends to then extend northwards, although fizzles out a bit as we go into the overnight period into Sunday, some dampness turning up across the south of Scotland. That's your synoptic chart for Saturday. There's the warm front that's responsible for that rain and increasingly murky conditions that's spreading up from the south, first across Wales and into Pennine areas, dregs of a front away toward the north of Scotland. Strongest of any wind typically is a southeasterly across the hills of Wales. Temperatures overall just above freezing point and tending to lift the freezing level to around 1200 to 1300 metres across Scotland as the day is going on. Into Sunday, and what's left of a very weak front is just draped across the south of Scotland and maybe just the far north of England as well. It leaves a rather messy zone. It's the leftovers of that area of rain that came northwards later on Saturday. So 1 or 2 bits of dampness, some low cloud, some fog across the hills in these areas that may well be rather persistent for the southern uplands, the Lake District and North Pennines through the day across higher terrain, some banks of fog possibly even lower down as well. Some uncertainty how far northwards that's got into the Highlands. A general stronger southwesterly flow across more western and northern regions will drag in low cloud off the Atlantic, so western coastal hills likely shrouded. The best chance for cloud breaks across the Highlands, typically more towards the Cairngorms. Bit of a different story across central England and Wales. We've got very slack high pressure here, so with some inversion conditions in place, most likely it's fog at the very lowest levels, with many of the hilltops of, say, the Peak District and across much of Wales may well be in the clear above that low level fog. Temperatures on most mountains typically above freezing level around 1200 1300 metres across Scotland, and across the Welsh mountains you end up above an inversion, so the mountain tops actually may well be a few degrees warmer than even the lower slopes where that fog persists. Things become a little bit more mobile as we go into the start of next week as fronts just move across the northern half of Britain off the Atlantic. High pressure still toward the south, so keeps things largely dry, but may just be bits and pieces of drizzle coming on to western coastal hills around the Irish Sea. The more persistent rain is likely focused across the western coastal mountains in Scotland, with some rain extending inland at times to more central parts of the Highlands. Best chance of some cloud breaks further east that you go, but much of the higher terrain covered most of the day. Looks a windy day, maybe even up to gale force across the higher tops, and temperatures typically above freezing by a good few degrees even to higher tops, but maybe just a lowering of temperature toward the far north later on behind that cold front. Doesn't last long though, because most likely into Tuesday the next warm sector is just skirting north of Scotland as high pressure stays toward the south. Mainly a dry picture for a good part of Britain, but western coastal hills in Scotland likely drizzly and damp, as that mild damp air off the Atlantic is just drawn in here. A strong southwesterly across much of the Highlands, may well be gale force in places, lighter winds the further south that you go, and maybe back to a chance of some low-level fog banks across the hills of England and Wales. Not quite sure to what extent inversion conditions will have got in by this stage though. Keep an eye on your local forecasts. Signs of a change developing through midweek and beyond, and some uncertainty how quickly this cold front comes southwards, but that just starts to lower the temperatures, and the band of rain for a time extending southeast, breaking up into showers, those turning more to snow and hail across the higher mountains in Scotland. The timing of this transition then through the day is uncertain. It might be it takes a bit longer than this to get that cold front southwards, but it is the story of a change of air mass that's just coming in for the later part of the week. Now, most indications do suggest that that colder air becomes extensive later in the week. We still treat it with some caution because it is a week away, and thinking back a week ago, we looked as though probably chillier, still changeable west-northwesterly air would prevail, and that sort of got shoved out of the way by higher pressure, so we keep a degree of caution in the longer range forecast, but the view that chilly air is most likely to be around, and a freezing level perhaps down even below 600 metres in the Scottish Highlands, and a more widespread frost overnight forming later in the week, and any precipitation that develops more likely of snow, and that falling at times to the lower slopes. So by the back end of the week, a chart that looks something like this, with low pressure drifting down from Iceland, a classic polar maritime air mass coming around on a northwesterly, still open to quite a bit of question just where that low will finally park itself or drift towards. It might be that the main body of the low ends up just to the west of the British Isles, which may just change the distribution of showers and even the overall temperature of the air mass. But I'd suspect a view of being rather chilly, rather showery, some snow on the hills at times, and that being the pattern that takes us towards next weekend. We shall watch all those developments, of course. Stay up to date with us every day with your local forecasts on the MWIS website. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.